Dr. Jacobs Abbey. I'll be making the presentation on behalf of the team Tragedy Affairs. The team is made up of 9 members, with Kafiu Towe as the leader and myself, Chichi, as the secretary. Our topic of research was, why was the United Nations established? It is often said that the United Nations has failed in its mandate to prevent global wars. As diplomats, you have been hired by a third party to provide 5 justifiable reasons why the United Nations is still relevant. Recommend areas of improvement that will make the mandate of the UN more relevant. In this perspective, our research will present the facts behind the establishment of the United Nations. It will outline the challenges as well as the successes and failures of the United Nations, and attempts to discuss the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is viewed by many as the UN's most important accomplishment. Before discussing some notable accomplishments of the UN, let's begin with this short video, which tells us more about the creation of the UN and its mandate.
And it is now my duty, my honor and my privilege in the chair to call for a vote on the approval of the Charter of the United Nations.
Nation by nation, the delegates stand up for the great new charter they hammered out together. 50 nations standing side by side, unanimous for peace. Now, final signing of the charter. China signing first, as the first nation attacked in this war. Dr. Wellington Koo's signature topping the long list to come. Then for Russia, Ambassador Gromyko commits his country also to the agreements and objectives decided upon, after days and nights of compromise and cooperation. 4 main agencies upon which the world now puts its hope. A powerful Security Council having final military authority. A General Assembly representing all member nations. A Social and Economic Council to tackle the causes of war. And an International Court to judge any international disputes. The signing is done. The Great Charter is completed. This draft of mankind's deepest hopes already a historic document. Perhaps the Magna Carta of peace-loving humanity itself.
Just like you saw in the video that we just watched, during the signing session, Eleanor Roosevelt, who was then a US senator and who was the first US UN diplomatic delegate, said, and I quote, "If we had had this charter a few years ago, and above all, the will to use it, millions dead would be alive. But if we flutter in the future in our will to use it, millions now living will surely die." As it is often said that the United Nations has failed in its mandate to prevent global wars, the question one may ask is, have the signing members fluttered in their will to use it? We have observed from the video that the United Nations is an international organization founded in 1945 after the Second World War by 51 countries. According to the preamble in its charter, it's committed to maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, and promoting social progress, better living standards, and human rights. But just like every other organization, the UN is not without its challenges in trying to carry out its mission and mandate. And these challenges comes from the fact that the organization is not self-reliant, and this can account for some of its failures. Indeed, a super state and a government of governments are not what the United Nations is. It imposes no taxes, it has no army of its own, it relies on its member contributions, and it relies on the political willpower of its member states. In fact, some people has viewed the United Nations as a toothless bulldog, In our quest for well-resourced information, we realize that the cause of its notable failures are from diverse sources and are rooted in some institutional shortcomings. Now, looking at the era of peacekeeping and security, the steps taken to settle unresolved conflict has so many diplomatic protocols to go through. As a result, the list of unresolved conflicts keeps piling up, with the example of ongoing conflicts between Yemen and Syria. And in addition, as we all know, the recent Russian invasion of Ukraine, to mention a few. But despite all this, the UN has made tremendous progress in the accomplishment of its mandate as enshrined in its charter. One example is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, approved on December 10, 1948. These are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. Human rights include the right to life and liberty, freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work and education, and many more. Next, we can talk about the UN humanitarian missions across the globe, which has helped millions benefit from UN humanitarian organizations such as the World Food Programme. We have UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations Refugee Agency. Another area we're talking about is peace and security. The UN has made significant advancements, mostly in terms of nuclear arms proliferation and disarmament. Also in the area of economic growth, the UN has done tremendously well, talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, also known as the Global Goals, which was adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people enjoy peace and prosperity. All this can be seen as the capstone of the UN accomplishments. Finally, lots of policies have been put in place to promote gender equalities and empower women across the globe. In view of all these accomplishments, we at Team Security Affairs recommend that for the UN to still be relevant, the organization needs to relook its challenges and draft appropriate reforms to enhance its global performance in the area of peacekeeping, and more reforms should also be introduced, just like the recent Security Council reform on the justification of the use of the veto power by veto member states. The Security Council must be reformed to be more inclusive, representative, transparent, and effective, as well as to exhibit better cooperation and consensus building. In addition, the UN could have its own army as a self-empowerment in order to ease the contributing nation for constant financial burden. We also recommend that more actors need to get involved in all the areas of the United Nations. Furthermore, there should be a reform which enforces collective contribution from all member states to promote equitability in decision-making. The organization can also address the issue of policy-based coalition to revitalize the multilateral system and close the gap between belligerents. We also believe that addressing challenges to multilateralism can increase interest in the mechanism available to the world community to address matters of international importance. Finally, we strongly suggest that the UN innovatively embraces more creative and collective actions to handle upcoming issues. Based on these findings, our research concluded that the United Nations is a work in progress, and we all need to allow room for improvement, as it is impossible for any given institution to succeed all the time. But for the UN mandate to be effective and efficient, the full cooperation of all its members is required to make it more relevant. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Wow. Thank you very much. And Salome, if you can stop sharing the screen in a second. Awesome. Wow, that's a very, very, very powerful presentation. For once, I felt I was listening to a documentary from, but I thought that it was indeed a very powerful presentation give me a second, somebody's making noise. All right, I thought it was a very powerful presentation from Chichi and the rest of the team. This is awesome, good presentation, well researched. Just get to know that a copy of this presentation is on its way to UNITA because they are very interested in evaluating the performance of the United Nations. And so this is a very good presentation, and I just can't wait to see what will happen on Wednesday when I send this to them on Monday, and they'll get back to me on Wednesday about their perspective of the presentation and the recording, which is interesting. Great. So now let's go to Jerome for a question to the group.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, it was another great presentation. I think if you combine these presentations, yeah, you have. We don't need to give another lecture anymore. And of course, we just give this thing, and then the next.
That's it. Group. That's it.
It was very good. Yeah, no, it really was. Yeah, I have a few, maybe two questions. For example, if you strengthen the role of the United Nations, well, also you saw like last week that most of the funding comes from like the US, Europe, China. So that will also mean that the UN would follow their priorities, because if you give the money there, then the priorities go there. So that's. But do you think reform, also the Security Council reform, would be possible right now? Because, of course, you have the veto. People want to keep in control. They want to keep the power. Do you think that it's possible to change it, or do you think there should be something new to replace it? How do you see those things? So the Security Council reform, and the problem that if you give the UN too much power right now, then it could be that the ones who fund it, do something that others do not want to do.
Yes, Titi, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jerome. Trying to articulate the questions. I think you have two questions there. But with regards to the Security Council reform, we strongly believe that there is a need for a reform, because it appears that the US is dominating the Security Council, and for those who are the principal financial contributors, like US, they will keep dominating it. So it is quite important that the Security Council includes other members, especially in the 5 member seats. I think it should expand to other regions and bring other regions into that 5 permanent seats rather than we already have, so that there will be better representation and better cooperation.
Awesome. Awesome. Good. Good answer. And then the rest of the team can also actually jump in to respond. Now, in your recommendations, yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Kafu.
Let's Kafu. Thank you, Dr. Abe. Thank you, Professor Jerome, for this for your question. Yeah, the UN Security Council can still be reformed, but the problem is that there should be much more research into why those 5 members are permanent. Because when you look at the countries which form the permanent members, they are the signing members at the San Francisco conference. So they just made sure that they remain their position as some kind of founding members. as they put themselves in the same Security Council and put up that veto items there. Like at the end of everything, we have debated for so many years to come up with this charter, and we are the deciding members of the charter. But I believe that now that the UN is becoming more inclusive, there were only 50 countries at the signing, and now we have close to 200 countries, more than 190 something countries in the UN system, and the 10 members have moved to 10, the 5 permanent members, which were the only members, have moved now to 10, and the 10 are rotatory. So it's one reform already that is chipping in. And the recent reform, which was surely rejected by Russia, that asked the veto members to always justify their veto before they cast it. And it was rejected by Russia, but I think a negotiation is still on. So yes, the reform are still possible, though those 5 members who signed the charter are still holding their grips so that they can still show their dominant power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any more thoughts, contributions, suggesting? So one of the things that you said, which is interesting and funny, is the fact that the 5 permanent nations have just decided that they are going to hold on to that power. I like to always remind students the framework and the understanding of the United Nations system. The system is a political institution. It may not appear as political as we do politics in our countries where people vote and all that, but the system is extremely political, meaning that the agenda of the United Nations is primarily subject to national interest. And so in order for you to have a real reform, the interest of those nations must be met. So if Russia believes that if you want them to justify the veto, it is against their national interest, there's no way you're going to get that. Whereas the same way, if the United States believe that it is going to go against their national interest, you are not going to get that. But I agree with your group that there has been some level of add-on, even though the other nations that have been added to the Security Council are just ceremonial because they still do not control the veto power. They have no veto powers except the 5 permanent nations. And so that's just a clarification. Now, my question to your group, now, Chichi had also suggested, just as Vincent had mentioned, that we should have a permanent army of the United Nations. Now, I'll ask the same question I asked Vincent, and I want to see the angle at which your group answers that. Now, remember, the United Nations mandate do not permit the United Nations to invade a country. They must be invited by a sovereign nation in order for them to be able to provide military assistance. Now, wouldn't that be waste of money and resources? Because just understand that it takes a lot of money to manage, maintain, preserve a standing army. So will that be economically useful for the United Nations to have a standing army when the army itself will not have any real mandate of intervening into a country's situations except being asked by a country to come in? And what is wrong with the current approach where nations contribute military to the charter that established the nation? So the United Nations. So what is your perspective on that? And any of the group members can jump on.
Okay. I think I'll just attempt to answer the question, then any other group member can likewise do same.
Sure, go ahead.
Research, we identified the fact that the United Nations does not have a standing army, and we also highlighted the financial burden and constraints that the UN is having because of lack of cooperation by all member states when it comes to finances. And this has largely affected the contributing troops for peacekeeping because based on findings, they have a lot of financial issues, which runs into shortage of equipment, and also it also affects early intervention. And in our research, we were able to discover that sometimes these troops are not being paid on time. The money doesn't get to them on time from the UN. So looking at these inherent challenges, we think and believe that if the UN can have its own standing military troop, we think finances will be better managed, and there will be much more early intervention in issues of peacekeeping and conflicts. So these are my own thoughts on this. Any other member of the group can respond. Thank you.
Thank you. I see you are not too confident with your response, Chichi.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
One second. One second. For a very long time, and I know how she wasn't confident with the response. So I just wanted to laugh. All right, Kafi, before you speak, I think Salome wants to speak because let's allow Salome to respond, and then Chichi, and then Kafi, you can come in. I see the also on me, so she was also going to respond, but let's.
Okay, so Dr. The UN has UN police UNPO, and aside the UN police, they have the formed police units. So my simple add-on is, if the UN has a UN police, why can the UN not have a UN military? And so I think that if the UN has a UN police, then equally the UN can have a UN military.
Very good question, good observation. If you recall, during the class, I'm not sure whether it is week 5 or 6, Ambassador Johan Bird did a whole presentation on the security operations of the UN. And then we realized that the UN police are armed from based on what Ambassador Bird told us. Now, they provide support to the UN systems. And again, remember that the maintenance of police, even the contribution of the UN police, still count on member nations. They don't have a standing, the AMPU that don't have a standing police force as like you have the police force in Ghana, Nigeria, US, or local counties. No, even the UN police force is still member nations. But police unit. There's a reason for that. Look at the mandate that established agencies within the United Nations. So, for instance, the UN Special Courts or the UN, let's say, for instance, in Sierra Leone, there was one time they had the United Nations Army in Liberia, the United Nations Army Mission in Liberia, and other places. Those are defined, mandated operations within the UN system that requires member nations to donate. Did I use the word donate? Send troops to support that. But the UN police is not a standing police like you have Ghana police force. So just have that at the back of your mind. It's the same process. It is support that nations provide to these institutions. And then remember that the United Nations work in partnership with these member nations, and these military forces are sent on a special force and special mission. It is not for free. There's a whole budget that goes along with it, and the nations. So your country, when your country contributes to the military or the police force, you get a lot of money from the United Nations. I recall ago when I was a resident in Ghana, I recall of the UN budget for the Ghana Armed Forces and the police service was used by the government for another thing, and it became a whole big issue. I'm sure everyone remembers that in Ghana. So keep that in mind, Salome, the standing police force. Great. Kafu, something.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. Yes, I think Salome has said it all. I was coming with from the same angle. It's not like the UN going to do recruitment to have full set of army, but like the way it works with contributing country, if like it has some, all the contributing country has some standing army, which are termed UN army within their armed force. That is something that could work.
No, you don't want to do, because in those who are serving in this, it becomes more of a privilege, and it becomes more of an opportunity, especially those in developing countries, to be assigned operations. People continue to beg and work their ways and do connections to be assigned a UN thing. Why? Because it financial benefits and other incentives. As soon as you within member nations that the special force within your regular army that is only assigned to the United Nations Armed Forces, then what you are doing, if you are not careful, is that you are going to start establishing division local army, and don't want to do with people who have guns and AK-47 rifles and all that. You don't want to give them a reason to believe that you are being selective or discriminating. Not at all. I think the process of selecting of the forces to join special operations is based on merit, training, capacity, and all that. And I believe it's a better approach, a unit where individuals are always looking forward in serving with the blue berets. That's what I would say. All right, Dr. Kubatu.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Samuel. And I am truly impressed with all the presenters already. And from our sister who presented first. And I congratulate you. And coming to Chichi, you really presented a very powerful presentation. And I thank you for highlighting the issues of security that UN need to still work on. 18 years ago, I just want to give you, all of you, one example. 18 years ago, today, in Burundi, in the country of Burundi, in the refugee camp of Gatumba, there was a massacre of 160 refugees of one tribe. They were killed. And when we say a refugee camp, immediately we have to think that the UN is there, the MONUSCO is there, there must be a protection from them for all the refugees. And this is a true story because I know the communities and many of extended families from where I come from, my tribe, I lost families there. So 18 years ago today, I am also a beneficiary of UN protecting my family during the war in my country. So there's so much still in need of what the UN can do in some of the unspoken places, areas, and countries where refugees are not protected well. So, of course, to add up on the recommendation that you shared with us is that the UN still have a long also work to do to make sure that refugees who are in the refugee camps are well. They have a very good security there, of course, well protected and well making sure that the reason why they left their countries and to be in a refugee camps is because of fleeing the issues and then not going to find the issues in the refugee camps. So thank you so much for highlighting the security issues with the UN and the refugees. Yeah, I appreciate it, and congratulations.